What's going on, guys? Another late night chill stream. Got some mythicism wars I need to get up to speed on. So tonight we're going to be watching some authors of Jesus Didn't Exist books, or I should just say Jesus books, that I've read. Over on Think For Yourself channel, Kevin, he was just on this week. He's been on before. We did some IRL streams when I was traveling. And so this is some big stuff. It's not getting a lot of attention, but I'm interested in it, and it's a big deal to me. Only got about 400 views from a month ago. He interviewed Dr. David Skrbina, who's been on the show many times, his book, The Jesus Hoax. And David Fitzgerald, who's the author of Nailed, the book Nailed, 10 Reasons Jesus Didn't Exist, as well as the series on Jesus mythicism called Jesus Mything in Action. So I like both these guys' books. I've never spoken to David Fitzgerald, but he wrote a review of Skrbina's book and was trying to poke holes in it and poke holes in him. So it's pretty baller that Kevin got them both on back to back. Because they didn't want to debate, or Fitzgerald, I believe, didn't want to debate one-on-one. So instead, I guess we have Kevin is the mediator. So we're going to be watching this on about 1.25, 1.5, and we're going to see some of the drama going back and forth. I've already watched about almost half of the Skrbina one. We'll just pick up where I left off there, and then we'll go to Fitzgerald, which I haven't seen any of.
Baccarat Rouge 540. You've seen the dupe for this all over TikTok.
I'm getting brave browser.
And so forth. They're writing against the Christian movement in the early 100s. And they say, hey, these guys are rabble rousers and they're troublemakers, and they're writing critically against them. Yeah, I mean, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing an early revolutionary movement that's a kind of a cult. It's like literally a cult. That's the word that the Romans used. They called it a cult in Latin. There's this anti-Roman cult that's growing. The rabble rousers, they're troublemakers, they're revolutionaries, and they need to be, we need to suppress them, keep a lid on them, whatever. This is what you see when you see the first Romans writing against them in the years 110, 120 AD.
And one of the points that people bring up to argue against this sort of the connection to Judaism and Christianity is they point out all of the examples that show that there clearly was a loss of control. The ethnic Jewish leaders fade away, and it becomes a truly Gentile religion. And to use another, so I like to use sort of modern examples to show how things are possible in antiquity. There's a few examples of this, but one of these cults, I believe from like 2020, the leader died, and she had her intentions. She had a doomsday thing. I think galactic beings were supposed to take her body, and the cult just kept on going. And you can imagine there could be a strategic design to the cult of Christianity that had a certain purpose. And then the leadership does fade away. That sort of that element does go away, and then the cult still continues. And a lot of the sort of division that we see could have been performative too. So a lot of the sort of early sort of theatrical division between Judaism and Christianity could have actually been a response to the danger of being connected to them. Maybe they were going out of their way to show, oh, we're not connected to Judaism. And so I think there's a lot of examples, but
yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, if Paul really created this hoax, which I think he did, it's interesting that he didn't make himself the figure. He didn't make himself the leader. It's not Paul's religion, right? He says, no, it's not me. It's that other guy, that Jesus, who he already died. He went to heaven. You can't kill him. He's dead and gone. He can never die. Isn't that convenient, right? We got a cult with a leader who's living in heaven, who's still alive up there in heaven, and you can pray to him and so forth, and you can never get to him. You can't kill him. The Romans can't kill him. He never dies. That's super convenient, by the way, if you're going to create a new cult, right? Don't make the cult about yourself, because you're going to die, and then your cult goes away. If you want a cult to live forever, you got to put it on some guy, a magic guy who's up in heaven.
Yeah. The Romans could never kill the messianic leader if he never existed and he's ruling from heaven. Good point. Can't be defeated. A cult movement, Bar Kokhba gets killed, the leader gets killed, the movement kind of dies. You can't kill Jesus if he's already dead and in heaven and the right hand of God.
never be killed. So that's actually kind of a really, really good point, right? It's also a good point that it's not Judaism, because there was really no hope of converting the masses to Judaism. That was never going to work. So you needed something sort of like Jewish friendly, like with a Jewish God and a Jewish savior like Jesus, and Jewish prophets like all the guys in the Old Testament. You can bring all these Jewish elements in, but you got to cast it in a way of a savior who's here for the Gentiles, for all people, right? And then maybe you have a little hope of your cult will grow into the Gentile world, and that's exactly what happens. The early leaders would have been Jews. Paul's writing to Jews, the gospel writers are Jews, but very, very quickly, if we look at the early church fathers, even probably from the year 100 onward, then it starts drawing in the Gentiles. The Gentiles sort of buy into this mythology because it sounds wonderful. All right, God is on my side, and I'm promised eternal life, and all these kind of nice little, childish sort of things, and it actually draws in some Gentiles, and then it becomes a Gentile church at that point. And in fact, it becomes anti-Jewish because of the various passages that were written into the Gospels, where the Jews were opposing what Paul and the gospel writers were doing. They ran into opposition from their fellow Jews. You see that opposition in the Gospels, and then the Gentiles come in, and then they start seeing that, well, the Jews were opposing us. Well, yeah, they were. And so you get a little bit of that flavor, that anti-Jewish flavor in those early Christian fathers, which is really kind of an interesting story in its own right.
Another example that I've seen a parallel with this development is in the African-American churches that were first built for slaves. Slaves were given a specific sort of certain portions were given to them from Christianity. They omitted things like the Exodus. They wouldn't tell the slaves about the part of the Exodus because, hey, the last thing you want to do is like, hey, did you know that there's a story where slaves get free? And so they selectively, strategically said, this part of the book, the sort of behavior, the sort of things from Christianity that would get them to behave well and be sort of maybe accepting of their situation. And then, just like what we're talking about, originally the black churches were led by white guys. They didn't just have some slave be the priest, that developed later. The white guys originally were teaching the slaves, and then there's a development. All of a sudden, hundreds of years later, there's a black priest. There's black churches that are like sort of racist against whites, etc. And that's later. And so we see that parallel, how it could start with Jewish leadership, and then that fades off. It's Gentile controlled. And it's not proof against the idea that Jesus is a hoax, proving that in the middle of this history, the Gentiles not only take over their own church, but begin this sort of theatrical rivalry with regular Judaism. That's not proof that the original structure of the stories had a certain intention.
Yeah, right. A lot of it's just natural evolution of these kind of things, right? The ideology grows.
Paula White leads a black church. Is that right, Amalek? I think I've heard that before. They probably love her.
Draws people in. They modify it. I think it's really interesting story, especially with blacks and African culture, right? Christianity is really big in Africa these days. That's why the Pope, he went there recently. I don't know if he's still there or not. Which is really kind of striking. You got these 100% black nations, and they're deeply Catholic in some sense. Although it's kind of a distorted Catholicism where they kind of they interpret things their own way and in their own light, and I guess that's natural, right? Any people are going to interpret religious documents in their own light, in their own context. But yeah, that's just sort of the evolution of this growing kind of ideology. It draws other people in. They sort of change their.
Okay, where's the drama?
This guy is a stubborn eater until recently. Spot and tangle unkibble.
To go into that gray area, that sort of mystery that we all have to dispute over, the European Christian history throughout the middle of this progress.
Yeah, Paula White seems like a black preacher.
It allows them to accumulate the wealth. They use the wealth to manipulate. Supposed to be no bodily remains at all. So that blows.
Dismiss it as we're these carpet-biting, hateful people that it came out of just some anger. Say Peter and Paul and a few others literally.
Pretty pointed reply to this review, and it's on Jesus.
All right, here we go. Here's
I tried to cover every major critical response.
To have entanglements at all, and so you could see how that would be part of his behavior.
Absolutely. So I think that was a really kind of interesting addition. One other important addition to the second edition of the book was response to critics, because when the first edition came out, of course, it attracted a lot of negative comments, right? Hostile text. People are attacking this and attacking that, attacking my motive, ad hominems against me, and all the usual things you can imagine, because a lot of people didn't want to hear this story that Jesus was a hoax, the Jesus story was a hoax. And I got criticism about not responding to the critics, And of course, in the first edition, there's really no chance to do that. But over several years, I'm having debates and online discussions, and I'm going to meetings, and I'm giving talks. And so I'm building up
his chapter.
The critical views of my theory. So I dedicated actually 2 chapters in the new edition to dealing with the critics against me. So I go through some 2 dozen kind of the most common criticisms of the Jesus hoax book and the thesis and me personally and so forth. I go through at least 2 dozen of these, and I try to respond, at least in brief, some are a little bit longer, try to answer the critics. And I think that's always an important thing to do. And I was able to do that in the second edition. So, I tried to cover every major critical response. I tried to cover every alternate hypothesis to what happened in the Jesus story. Some people said, well, maybe Paul was hallucinating. He wasn't really malicious. He would just, had some kind of, mental episode or something, right? Or maybe it was the Romans who invented the Jesus, or I mean, there's a lot of, different possible kind of interesting theories out there what actually happened. And I try to touch on those. I try to touch on any alternative possibilities, and I say they don't really make sense. I think the hoax is the best theory. I talk about as many reasonable objections to the thesis that I could. I respond to them. So I try to make it a really kind of a complete package, and yet make it still accessible to people. So the second edition is expanded. I think it's very readable. It's accessible to non-experts. I didn't want to write a book for specialists. I've written other books for specialists, so I can do that, but I didn't want to do that here. I wanted to make it really accessible for people without a lot of training and background to really see what's going on, to see the pros and the cons, and I just want to lay out the case and let people decide.
Right, and I think we can't go through every single criticism that you've had, but one of the things that I'd like to chime in with, as far as the David Fitzgerald letter, which you have, if anyone's curious, Scribina does have a response letter on, was it JesusHoax.com or org?
Yes, JesusHoax.com, the homepage for the book. We have a little homepage, and you scroll down on the homepage, and there's a response to this malicious book review that was written against me, published back in February this year. So it was really kind of attacking review, as you know. And I wrote a pretty lengthy and I think a pretty pointed reply to this review, and it's on JesusHoax.com.
And one of the main things that people start out with, and I've been dealing with this by, having a lot of different people with different views on, and then showing my version of this. I am more, I try to be sort of, I show them the evidence that led me to the conclusion rather than presenting my conclusion. And you get this pushback where to say what we're generally saying is seen as this inherently hateful thing. And what my best response, I could write a whole book responding to that, but the quickest way I can respond to that is make it clear that there are practicing Orthodox rabbis that literally, not all of them, they all have their own different takes, but there is a tradition amongst them where some of them say they have a day of fasting to celebrate the fact that they say Peter and Paul and a few others literally purposely subverted this group. They have their own version. And that doesn't mean that I think every part of their tale is true, because some of them, I'm sure you've seen this, they go into how, Peter learned the true names of God and performed magic for the Christians. And so obviously I reject the superstitious part of their version of it, but you can't call me hateful of a group that thinks this. They actually think this. And this is a common theme. If you criticize anyone in this group, whether it's the ethnicity or the religion or now the country, you will get attacked by people in the middle. And then people have just resorted to showing the clips of rabbis saying this stuff, whether it's about history or religion, or a lot of the things that we're saying are literally straight from the mouths of certain practicing. And so the ad hominem of this is coming from an irrational anger or hatred or resentment is just plain, it's a factual, it's not true. It literally is something that the other extreme agrees on in a different way. I'm sure you don't believe the superstition, you don't think Peter was actually doing magic for the Christians, etc. But, and who knows, maybe they came up with that in retrospect, but regardless, they think this too, loosely, and therefore you don't get to dismiss it as we're these carpet-biting, hateful people that, it came out of just some anger delusion.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole hate speech debate has really been so distorted and overused, it destroys the meaning, right? I mean, hate speech is now anything that you say that I hate. That's a hate, that's what all this. That just says I hate what you're saying. Okay.
All right, Chewy. I have some other questions.
We're going to see a lot of dog food ads. The last two are dog food, cat food.
Why do you hate the bath?
Cat's down here.
So that 99% of hate speech is someone doesn't like what someone said. So yeah, if you're going to take any position on any controversial topic, religion for sure, someone's gonna hate what you said, and they're gonna start calling you names, whether they want to call you a hater or a supremacist or whatever they want to call you, because they don't like it. And it's the same old story. Name calling and labeling is not an argument. That's not an argument, right? If you don't like what someone's saying, if you don't like my theory, that's fine. Then come up with some actual arguments against it, right? Come up with a different theory or a better theory, or give me some counter arguments. Show me where I'm wrong. But I'm open to any sort of critical comments. I'm happy to debate anybody on this topic. Not a lot of people want to debate me, I guess, because a lot of them just feel like, hey, they don't have much to gain by doing that, I guess. I mean, I've done debates before live and on podcasts. I'm happy to talk to people, but a lot of the critics against me in particular seem to be happy just to sort of throw bullets at me, shoot arrows at me, and then run away. And then they just don't ever have to actually answer for their
come on, Fitzgerald.
I have literally tried to organize two with you. Before speaking to you, I figured, okay, if I can get the other side established, I'll reach out to David. Two scholars have formally said, I will not debate Scribina.
I will not debate.
It's unfortunate because if it's so silly and it's so easy and so easily dismissed, then let's do it. Let's. Then you have an easy cut. It'll be a cakewalk to shoot me down if what I'm saying is wrong or fallacious or misleading.
We will not debate any. This is my scholar. We will not debate anybody that says Jesus is made up. You're an anti-Semite if you say the Jews lied about Jesus.
oh, you'll win in a cakewalk. It'll be a no-brainer, and you'll look like a genius. So let's come on, let's have a little one-on-one chat, and we'll talk through it. But yeah, they don't want to do that. It's actually pretty rare to find someone who's really kind of do a one-on-one live discussion on these things. I think they just don't have the arguments. They don't like the message. They don't have a counter argument. They can't really critique what I'm saying in any effective way. And so the easiest thing is just walk away and not talk about it.
And what's funny is there's a sort of hierarchy of like the most public atheists are on the far end of this discussion, promoting Zionism and promoting the sort of criticizing Christianity for being too conservative, and then we keep on going down the more so-called fringe you get, and then this level of like the more edgier mythicists such as Richard Carrier, who I've had on a lot, they're accused of that too. So the historicist level, the next like more kosher level, like Bart Ehrman, he'll call that, like, I don't know if he has personally, but like that community, that level of sort of atheism calls the next level to be hateful, and that's crazy conspiracy theory, and then they're doing it to anyone else that has anything.
In the peer review of Carrier's latest book, what is it called? Obsolete Paradigm? One of the peer reviewers was clearly a Christian, and he said in the peer review, like, they said it's anti-Semitic at worst, or something like that. Something about throwing anti-Semitism around at Carrier already.
Exactly. Everybody got somebody to the left of them, right? And you say, well, those guys are crazy. And then they're over here saying, well, those guys are crazy. And you just goes right down the chain, right? So, I mean, yeah, that doesn't get you anywhere. You got to talk, that's why it's an objective, empirical, academic discussion. I mean, it really kind of needs to be maintained at that level. There's a lot that we can say. Some people think, well, you can't say anything objective about religion because it's all just belief or something. But that's actually not true. There's a lot of factual things, a lot of strong arguments that we can make, a lot of inferential arguments that we can make. We can really make strong cases for different things. So there's a lot that can be said on an objective, academic, neutral basis. And it doesn't have to devolve into, mindless criticism and ad hominems and hate speech and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's the level that I operate on. That's what I expect people who criticize me. I expect them to operate on that same level. I'm happy to talk to critics. It's a waste of time if somebody's just going to start calling me names because, well, that's too Jew, and I don't even bother responding. But that's what we get. We do not have a lot of good responses in this case. So I say, well, that's their problem, not mine. I'll just make my case, and I'll put my book out there, and we'll see how it goes.
And like you've already acknowledged, one thing, we don't know precisely what was going on with Paul. Some people say Paul is not even a real person. There's all sorts of gray area. But right now, many of you guys can walk into your living room or go to your parents' house and see boomers sending money to Israel because they believe in Jesus. And so we can start with today. I look out the window when I'm in America and I see this behavior. I see this phenomenon. And we can start with that. Then we can start with the oldest things we have. There's all of this gray area and things to dispute in between. But the thing that you're looking at that a lot of these other scholars are not looking at, and they refuse to look at, is just today. None of them want to look at today and connect the dots at all. And they're accusing the connection of the dots to be this complicated thing. But actually, by saying that's a coincidence, the burden is also on you to explain how we got here. How did we get to this where my boomer dad is sending money to Israel because some fanatical Christian pastor is saying salvation comes from the Jews? Jesus said it in the New Testament, and it's right there. They didn't change the book. This whole idea that they corrupted the Bible. The Schofield Bible is now Jewish, but it used to be based in Aryan. This sort of delusion that Christianity got off track, and now it's like that.
Remember Ian Carroll in the Hodge twin interview? Ian Carroll was like, yeah, they Zionized it. Like, it wasn't Jewish before. Jesus wasn't Jewish before. Schofield, made it Jewish. Like, come on, dude. The Bible was always Jewish. It was always Jewish fairy tale fantasies.
To me, it was strategically created with this intention. Yeah, I'm sure you could prove that control was lost. They didn't. I don't think that they have been calling the rabbis every single decade to ask for the next part of the plan. But like I said earlier, they don't need to do that when it's created with this specific intention. Like I said, the cult leader died, and then for months, the cult followers were decorating her body and continuing on this cult. And even if the initial cult leader passes away, his intention is still embedded in the cult itself.
Exactly. In this case, you actually need it. You need the cult leader, Jesus, to pass away and to be reborn in heaven. You actually need his death. It's not a bad.
Yeah, Amalek, remember we watched that guy on Instagram with the mustache, and he had a real viral video about, our Orthodox Bible is the only real one, and all the rest have been Judaized and are Jewish, right? Remember that dude?
That thing. That's the key thing. That's the whole essence of the cult, is he gets to live forever. You get to live forever, too. All you got to do is believe in this ghostly guy who's up there in heaven somehow. So yeah, it's kind of ironic, right? Normally the death of the leader is a bad thing, but this is the essential thing for the Christian cult. And it's a death cult. I mean, I've talked about it before. And I've been through Europe, and you look at the churches, and you say this is a death cult. It's a fixation on death and the supposedly unprovable, never attainable belief in some kind of afterlife. It's I don't know. It's just really mind-boggling that so many people have such a belief in this kind of system, and spend their effort, their time, their money supporting it. It's really, really a tragic situation.
Centuries of these wars where both sides are these often European men praying to this Rabbi Jesus. Both sides, the English and the other side were praying to the same God, hoping that he would come back and save them.
Right. Both sides of the war, they're both praying to the same guy, like, save me, shoot.
Yeah, that's right, Nate Live. Those damn Judaizers Jewing up my Jesus. The Jews hijacked Christianity. No, Jews created Christianity.
Them, no, save me, shoot them, right? Yeah,
we've been in this cycle where every time there's a crisis, a crusade or a world war, these Christian leaders are like, see, this is what we said was going to happen. Now we have our doomsday, and they milk it out, and then Jesus never comes down. They never figure it out, and then they get the new grift, the next cycle of doomsday, and none of us are immortal, so we don't see how absurd it all is. But how many people have been praying on both sides of these people grinders, these wars that are just sort of genociding the goyim, and both sides are praying to this rabbi character. And so it's up to these sort of blue-pilled atheists to explain to me how this coincidence occurred. How did we get here by coincidence? It's not just on our side to explain how this all occurred. You need to explain how could we get here if this wasn't part of the initial intention.
Yeah, it's an important story. I appreciate your efforts to help get that out there. It's we need more people talking about it. Even if you criticize it, we need people talking about it. So that's what we have to do, I think.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen it. The farther you get down, the more your shovel is clinging on anything real or moral, the more you get consequences. And so it's not easy, but crazy enough to keep trying. And I hope you keep pursuing this. And I can't wait to try to read your book in German. I'm going to make an attempt. I'm at a B2 level, but I'm going to give it it's a good learning experience.
So you can go both ways. You have the luxury going both ways. You get the English version and the German and kind of compare them. Let me know if I got any problems. But yeah,
I'll let you know if I can find any errors. I'm sure I won't see them. But yeah, I really appreciate you talking with me, and I hope we can speak again in the future. And everyone check out David Skrbina's Jesus Hoax. He also writes about the Unabomber, panpsychism, and all of the cool topics.
All right, now we're going to go to a few days later, has on David Fitzgerald. It's the War of the Davids. Davids debating Jesus. So he wrote the real good book, Nailed. Like a summary of a lot of carrier stuff.
Your divinity lies within. You must learn to operate your brain, operate your soul, learn how to communicate, brain to brain, soul to soul with other people. Your divinity lies within.
Welcome to Think for Yourself. We have David Fitzgerald here. Thank you very much for coming. How are you doing today?
Fantastic to be here. Thanks so much. I'm good.
Appreciate it. Okay, so to start out, I like to start out with the things we agree on. And you and I, we agree on something called mythicism. I think we have slightly different views outside of that, but we can briefly go over why you are a mythicist atheist, and then after we've fulfilled that, we can go into the more, we can try to find disagreements to make things funner. So how did you said you came from a Baptist background? How did you get from that to thinking Jesus is completely fake?
Yeah. It was not an instant step. I was like I said, I was raised Southern Baptist, so that was all my worldview for a long time. And then one day I caught myself about to say something that I didn't know was true or not in the middle of a debate.
Thanks for the sub. Watch the collapse.
And I realized, oh my God, I'm just like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. I'm just parroting what was told to me. And from that moment, Christianity never felt anything but fake, right from the get-go. I mean, it was like one of those things where I had this real bedrock beliefs that were unchallengeable, unassailable. But as soon as that crack appeared, the whole thing came crashing down. And for 16 years, I was a perfectly happy atheist. Never even crossed my mind to think there might not be a Jesus until I started getting curious about
like a tear going down his eye.
Which of them is giving us the real Jesus.
He's crying.
Because, fun fact, they're not all talking about the same guy. They're four very different portrayals of this Jesus and who he was and what he did, for works that are all meant to be biographies written by people who knew him, friends and family, associates. And so in all innocence, I was just curious to know which of the Gospels was giving us the real story. What was the real Jesus to parse out from the fake, gospel Jesus? And as I say in my book, Nailed, once you start pulling on that thread, sooner or later, you're not going to have a sweater anymore because red flags just start popping up immediately.
Maybe
like
he
the fact
smoked
that
a doobie and then did
are
some
not written by eyewitnesses.
eye drops.
Like the fact all our information we know about Jesus comes from these 4 Gospels, and all our 4 Gospels seem to be based on the first Gospel, which seems to be completely 100% an allegory and not about a real person at all.
Yeah, so it was a gradual progression to thinking that Jesus is possibly
big teardrop coming down his eye right there.
That he's possibly completely myth. How certain are you?
Well, here's the thing. There's nothing implausible that Jesus was just one more failed apocalyptic prophet. I mean, we had plenty of those. But the more I look into, not just Jesus, because he's not the only one with a dodgy backstory, but you look at any religious founder figure, and you start seeing the same problems and the same patterns and the same scholarly responses and defenses of them, no matter which figure you're talking about. So much so that now I'm convinced it's normal for major world religions to start out with a completely 100% made-up founder figure who's just a clearinghouse for all the ideas and theological constructs they're trying to put together. And the exceptions are the ones that started with an actual guy who had an idea. And everything else...
Amalek says, I would love to see Fitzgerald and Carrier's face to HT's clip. Kevin said on the stream with me the other day that Carrier saw HT like tweet about it before or something and said it was not happy or something. Hey, it's not our fault that the only guy that's agreeing with you is on a big platform is HT. What does that say about all the other atheists and biblical scholars? They can't get it.
To be collaborative efforts, collaborative art projects, and they're usually at the behest of who's ever running the country. So they come from the top down, not the bottom up. So it's very interesting that we could talk about any of our major world religions, and you'll see that pattern happening.
Yeah, I think once I read parts of Book to the Hebrews and these really old Christian writings, and they're describing these events happening in the heavens.
Yes.
And that's what really made it possible in my eyes. It was really hard to imagine what mythicists describe as this sort of celestial revelatory
Hebrews is
being,
so obviously
because originally I read
book.
the entire Bible, I read all of the books, and I didn't know what order they were in. I just assumed this was all just found in one box. I never just having some semblance of dates really opened my eyes to the possibility. I entertained all sorts of these different theories, whether it's the at-will stuff, the mushroom stuff, and I've seen a lot of these not stand up to time. A lot of people have debunked so many of these, but no one has debunked I guess the first person to have this was Doherty, right? This idea that when we just look at the original 7 letters that we don't know are authentic, some people say authentic, we don't see the
letters of Paul, you're saying.
These small exceptions that we argue over. It's definitely possible to me, but I think regardless of whether this started with an actual guy or whether this started with a myth, we get to this lie.
Yeah, we're
the
still
gospel
1.5.
of Jesus is, we can all everyone can sit at the table, whether it's the historicists, the mythicists, the people even further down the line, and we can say, okay, this gospel version of Jesus is a lie.
Yeah. And what's more, whenever Christians brag about, the consensus, everybody thinks Jesus existed, all historians say that. Well, first of all, that's not true in the first place. But what they conveniently ignore is that, what if the secular historians, Jesus is real, yours is not, and vice versa. And that's the thing they never quite are fully honest about.
Like, let me try to read out a quick, I know you know this stuff, but just so that if anyone's watching, that you guys understand how, when people say there's a celestial revelatory Jesus being described in these early letters, Hebrews 8, now the point in what we are saying is this: we have such a high priest, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, a minister in the sanctuary and the true tent that the Lord set up, not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Thus it is necessary for this priest also to have something to offer. Now, if he were on earth, he would be no priest at all. They serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. And I don't even know what are the refutations to this when the historicists are presented with this. What are the best arguments you're facing?
Well, I was going to say, they really don't have good arguments against that. There's other places in that book of Hebrews, they compare Jesus with Melchizedek, this Old Testament figure associated with Abraham, and they
don't ever really address any of these points. I've been saying that a lot in the book club calls. They don't ever address the points, all the abundance of different arguments and points and smoking guns. For Hebrews, what they'll say is this is after the ascension. This is when Jesus is in heaven after the ascension, but that's not true, and that doesn't fit the context, and it never says that.
Both of them have no genealogy, no mother, no father. It's all these things that are in our Bibles. It's just like when you read 1 Corinthians 15, and they give this laundry list of everyone who saw Jesus, and nothing in that lineup matches anything in any of our Gospels. And everybody acts like, this is proof of the Gospels. No, this is saying the exact opposite. That these are just
Let me tell you about one of the worst food allergy panels I've ever seen. And only one food fixed it, and it was spot and tank.
These aren't part of a story yet. The early Christians, everything you read from Paul's letter and all the writers who were supposedly writing in his time, you get a completely different kind of Christianity from what happens after Mark, quote unquote, writes his gospel. That's the first time we see this cosmic Jesus put in a what if God was one of us story. That's, again, 100% pure allegory. You can just go line by line by line. And even Matthew, when he's retelling his version, he actually connects the dots and says, as it was written in blah, 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 you know.
And so how certain are you that we have the right order? Because I've been trying to be certain
Rumble
about this
rants
for a while. I want to really
playing.
verify that we have the correct order.
I need help.
That it's Mark, and then it's Matthew, and then it's Luke. More so the first two. So I understand the common the reasons that they give, but for instance, the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, the Jewish Christians that were not following the Pauline version, they had this gospel to the Hebrews that apparently we don't know, we can't read the whole thing, but it apparently was like the book of Matthew. And so when I read that, I think, okay, so there's a chance that that's the original gospel. If I'm wrong, Paul says that Peter has the book to the circumcised. I have the gospel to the Gentiles. And so when I read that, I think, okay, maybe Mark is the later version of the gospel to the Gentiles, and then maybe the book of Matthew is a sort of like an evolution of the book of the Hebrews.
I mean, possible, but I don't think so. For one thing, thing that Paul says is that he complains that there's other rival apostles of his who are preaching another Jesus, another gospel. So we know that early Christianity, the further it goes back, the more ramified it is, the more variegated it is. But scholars, and I think it's easy to say that that's the general accepted among objective scholars, neutral scholars who don't have a dog in the hunt. It seems that Matthew and Luke are both taking from Mark. Some of them also pose that there's another source they're also taking from, but I'm with the Farrar Goodacre hypothesis that says, well, no, Occam's razor, this is just those places where Luke is stealing from Matthew and from Mark. Mark appears to be the basic one, and the other ones are all building on it. Matthew repeats, I forget what the actual percentage is, but a huge amount of material from Mark is repeated and expanded on by Matthew. None of these four gospels that we have, and there were plenty more that didn't make the cut, but none of them were writing the gospel according to this guy, the gospel according to this guy. All four of them, the one we have in our New Testament, were setting out to write the one true gospel. In fact, Luke, he starts out his gospel by saying, so many people are writing gospels these days, it seemed to me to be a good idea to go back to our sources and see how the story came down to our generation. And then he basically steals his whole thing from Matthew and Mark, and then just goes his own way. When they're not in lockstep with Mark, they're completely incompatible. And that's a sign that they are working off this, making the improvements they wish he had said, changing things around. And you can see the story from gospel to gospel just evolve a little more.
Yeah, and I understand that. But what I was sort of suggesting is like possibly this book to the Hebrews that the Jewish Christians had, maybe that was infected with Mark stuff. Or in some semblance that the book of Matthew borrows from Mark because it got adapted from an older gospel, like, isn't that still
possible? I hear what you're saying. I mean, and there's so much that's possible when it comes to what we don't know about that first century of Christianity. I mean, it's bizarre when we think about it, that of that whole first 150 years to 200 years, we get one guy, Paul, his letters, nobody else, all the ones that are supposedly by Jesus' followers are clearly written by forgers later in their name and using it to spin doctor what's already been said. And that's bizarre to think about, that we really don't have. We should have like mundane records of the early church, if nothing else. But for whatever reason, not only do we not have, like, half of our letters of Paul are not from Paul, but even the letters that are generally accepted as being from Paul are mashups of multiple letters. So these things have been redacted.
Yeah, we only have the letters from the guy that didn't know Jesus.
If by some miracle Paul had written some letter thrown in a vault and a safe, and we just dug it up yesterday, we would have no way to know that was an authentic letter of Paul. We would just say, well, here's an interesting variant of Paul, that's different. We just don't have any originals to compare to, and that's true with everything in the New Testament.
One of the theories that's out there, and obviously there are many, there's as many forms of these gospels in the past as there are theories about to explain what happened. But one of the motivations people theorize that caused the formation of Christianity as we know it today, obviously there were all sorts of different iterations, but during the time that we can verify Christianity was at this level, that the gospels are being written, etc., there are these taxes and there are discriminations against normal Orthodox Jews. And some say that there was a motivation during this time to actually become something else. And so if you're a Jew, you're being taxed, things are being seized from your property, and there's already this other adjacent form of Judaism. Maybe it became sort of more popular, and you could see how maybe there was a reason to convert. As throughout history, we've seen Jews being motivated to convert to Christianity, whether it was the Spanish Inquisition, all sorts of times. Maybe that's one of the reasons.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine on that. There's so many possibilities. As far as what caused Christianity to spin off from Judaism, maybe Christianity is a spin-off from a different spin-off of Judaism. Maybe it's a spin-off from John the Baptist's cult. Because if I had to put money on who I thought was a real person, John the Baptist or Jesus, I'm not convinced either of them was real. But if I had to put money on just one, it would be John the Baptist. For one reason, we know that his cult was a rival to early Christianity. And really, you just have to read the gospel to see that too, because Jesus is constantly bumping into the followers of John and talking about how they disagree with one another. And Christianity puts so much effort and spills so much ink domesticating and corralling and co-opting John the Baptist's cult. And we actually have some Christian fictions written in the 2nd century called the Clementine Recognitions, the Clementine Romances, where you see groups of the Baptist cult and groups of the Jesus cult having debates on who was the real Messiah, which is fascinating to me. When we read Luke's gospel, the first 2 chapters are clearly not about Jesus at all, because he's barely in there, and when you take out the parts where he's put into there, it makes more sense, not less sense. I can give you examples of that if we want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm trying to resist because once we start it, there's just
right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really opened my eyes as to how this could have developed is finding out that, according to practitioners of Judaism, there has always been, whether we look at it in the past or today, the ones today and in the past, they describe Gentiles being not half converted, but basically obeying the 7 Noahide laws. If we read the Old Testament, the Torah, etc., there's a sequence of prophets. There's a clear narrative saying the descendants of these prophets have these rules. And if you're of the seed of Abraham and Moses, you have these extra rules, 613. And so there's this implication that the Gentiles only have to follow these 7 rules given to Noah. 6 of them were given to Adam, and then the 7th was given to Noah. And so I'll show you real quick. Today, we can become a Noahide. So they have today the ability to become a Noahide. So it says, and this is their official website, they say, in the time of the Second Temple, from 350 BC to 70 CE, in many places, there were monotheistic people known as heaven-fearers who were living among the pagan Romans. As the name implies, they were Gentiles who were adhering to the one true God.
Let's go, Kevin's Green Pilling, Fitzgerald.
Therefore, their spiritual loyalty was to the Jewish sages and the Holy Temple. And we can see that I could keep on going. Philo of Alexandria has descriptions of these sort of like, they're not converted, they're not circumcised, they're somewhat respecting the basic premise of the Torah and obeying the 7 laws of Noah. And Christianity, the Pauline version of it, seems to resemble that, except with this extra character.
Right. That's interesting. I've heard of the God-fearers, referring to the early Gentiles who admired Jewish thought and Jewish morality, and so they became Jews without becoming Jews in that same sense. And that's what Paul's audience was. That was his destination of choice. Hey, you don't have to get circumcised, you just have to do that. He found converts in that group. Now, whether those guys really go back to some alternate form of Judaism, I mean, that's also possible, because in the 1st century, Judaism was never so diverse as it is before or since. There's about 18 sects of Judaism that we know of by name in the 1st century. But Judaism itself, I want to caution us about thinking this may go back all the way to the beginning of Judaism. Judaism is not as old as we think it is. And this is something I didn't even know 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But Judaism as a thing keeps getting younger and younger and younger the more Old Testament scholars look into when these books were written. And I don't know if you know who Russell Gmurkin is. We lost him last year very suddenly. But the work he did on his book about ancient historians like Manetho of Egypt or Berosus of Babylonia influenced my book, Playing God, An Evolutionary History of World Religion, when I talk about the Old Testament section, because not only do we know the Moses story came from older stories, we know who wrote those stories, we know when they wrote those stories, and we have the whole literary timeline of Moses. And the first Moses, who's not our Moses, by the way, was written in about the 4th century BCE, and our Moses is a reaction to the Moses who came after that. These other stories.
Is this the Akkadian myth, the post-Babylonian Empire? Is that where he said it came from?
No, this is actually from a Greek writer originally, and whose name I'm blanking on at the moment. Was Heraclitus? No. Hecataeus of Abdera wrote a Greek-style story about an Egyptian of, I think, lepers and other outcasts from Egypt into the north and into the Levant, and that was a typical Greek colonization story, but featuring an Egyptian hero, and explaining how Egyptian culture went all the way up into Syria and all that.
That's amazing, because I knew about so it's funny, I knew about the post-Babylonian myths that resembled the other parts of Moses, the baby in the river, the commandments. I knew about that.
Yes.
I always thought that the original part of the myth was the sort of Exodus part, and I figured, okay, that's where they got creative.
Yes.
And you're saying, no, even that is just plagiarized.
Yeah. And again, it blows my mind, because this means Judaism is about 1,000 years younger than we thought it was. And at the same time that Russell Gmurkin was making these points about this comes from this book, this comes from this book.
Dude, don't make me catmog you,
archaeologist. His book came out completely independent of all this, saying, oh, by the way, we're looking at archaeological evidence for the practices of Judaism. They only go back to this about the 2nd or 3rd century BCE. Dovetails exactly with what Russell Gmurkin is saying. That our Torah, our Pentateuch, was written by Jews in Alexandria in the year, if I can get the years right, either 273 or 272 or 274 or 273. But he can pinpoint it not just to the 270s, but it had to have been one of these 2 years because of all the reasons he gives in his book, Berosus and Genesis, Manetho and Exodus.
And I haven't read this, but I'm going to assume it follows the trend that I've seen anytime I look at the older myths that the Old Testament is derived from. When I go back, I see a trend. There are not only more gods, and a lot of the human characters are now gods.
Yes.
There are female goddesses like in the oldest version of the Garden of Eden, not only is there a goddess, she solved the situation. She like helps. And then you see there's this progression of not only is it not a woman solving the situation, now it's her fault, and there's only a god. There is no Asherah anymore. They got rid of the Asherah. Yeah. There's a progression of, and I can only attribute that to
Thank you.
Religions.
Thank you, My6 Gorilla. And yes, late night chill stream. Late for me, real late for East Coast. Any Europe in the house? It's early in the morning in Europe, right?
Political ideologies they pursue, it's in their best interest to pursue.
You got any Viking Euro bros?
Any extra entanglements create a lack of control. So they described that there were like cults of Asherah. There were people that are like, oh, let's just worry about Asherah. And we see that when I lived in Cabo San Lucas for 2 years. I'd see these Mary worshiping parades. They'd go around just Mary. They just had statues of Mary, and I'm like, oh, I would never see that in New York. That was a very sort of it sort of reminded me of the Basque goddess worship. And so that progression of eliminate the other gods, not just for no reason, but because then you don't have these cults. Then you don't have these like, oh, I'm the priestess of Osiris on the side. I am the priestess of the goddess of love. No. We just have this. And now we're going to get rid of idols because idols make it so that you own the idol, you have control. Now it's just this thing that you can't even, it's not even tangible anymore. And it's just, they're continuously trying to get as much control as possible.
Did you see all
those are the ones that win. So it's not just
soccer players
motivation,
did some
but the other
like
ones
Viking
die.
Photo.
Exactly. Now we're the only game in town. They shave off the serial numbers and nobody knows it's not their bike anymore. Yeah.
Right.
You are going to love reading my book, Playing God, because I talk about all that. And I think you also love the book I'm working on right now. It's coming out this summer called He Will Rule Over You, A Woman's Guide to a Bible Written by Boys. Because when you look at the way women are depicted, treated, and talked about in the Bible, they're always either appendix to a guy, or they're whores, or they're evil queens, or they're sex objects. You know, they're just, or they're slaves, or they're basically just Stepford wives. But they're very, very rarely human, or treated equally. But getting back just a smidge to what you're saying, just in the last even 20 years, 10 years, we're what we know about the polytheism and the poly-Yahwehisms, the multiple versions of Yahweh that were all around Israel, has just blown up exponentially. And it's going to be really fascinating to see what our text
gives a lecture on anti-Semitism.
Israel, and the evolution of the Bible. It's just
Kevin
really mind-blowing.
he said he did
like the whole 20th
like
century of biblical archaeology was dominated for the first half century by people like Albright, who had the Bible in one hand and a pickaxe in the other, and if they found ruins, it's like, oh, we just found fill in the blankia, you know. And they don't stop to think, oh, maybe that's not it. You know, maybe the Bible came after that, and these are. No one started challenging the biblical source for all these archaeological findings until around the time that the Bible Unearthed was written by Asher Silverman and Neil Finkelstein. That was just a game changer, and ever since then, biblical archaeology has just been a whole new game, and it's just fascinating to see not just how different it is from the Bible, but how the Bible just flips the real situation over completely 100%. It's topsy-turvy compared to what really happened and where Judaism really came out of, and how many other cultures are bound up in what we call Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Abrahamic religions at all. Without Persia, you can't have any of those things. Without Greece, you couldn't have any of the laws of Moses. Without, it's fascinating to see when you start tracing out the roots of where what we usually think of as this big monolithic block is like, nope, it's all made up of parts of what came before it. And that's
it's really interesting. And this is an area that by researching you a little bit, I've seen that you've gone in the direction of exploring the sort of political implications, and you've had that sort of what was it, Sex Story Time Festival, right? What was it called?
I think you think of God's Pervert Story Hour.
Right. Okay. I'm censoring it a bit. so you've sort of branched out into these arenas of sort of exploring the freedom of your atheism. But I like that. I like the discussion, and so I'd like maybe we could take a moment to because as non-believers we sort of have a blank check, and what we find, and I've seen this happens in like the animal rights scene. I've seen this. Like I sit down at I'm a vegan, and I sit down at a vegan potluck, and I meet people that have completely different opinions to me. And I sit there, I'm like, oh, like we came to a similar decision. Some people did it for their health. Some people do it because I met a guy that hated animals, but he was religiously vegetarian. My dog showed up. I was in a bed with him.
But he
hated animals. So just to give an example of how we could have the same intersection and yet we have totally different things. He hated my dog, and I'm like, what's going on? And I thought he was going to be my friend because I'm like, oh, I met a vegetarian and we're jamming. And he's like, get that dog away from me. I hate dogs. I'm like, did you get attacked? He's like, no, I hate animals. I'm like, I thought you said you're vegetarian. He's like, yeah, I hate them so much that I don't want to eat them. They're so disgusting. Wow. And I'm like, and so just in the same way, atheists can be completely, I mean, I honestly think as soon as you're an atheist, it unlocks the ability to be more radical than anyone on either side of the spectrum, because now you have a blank check. And so I see that you have, you seem to be more of a leftist. I've met a few leftists. And so,
called out.
Are you an Atheism Plus member? I forgot.
I mean, that idea, that concept sort of fell out of favor as soon as it was invented. But I'm, atheism, like you said, if you call me a theist, I could be a Christian, I could be a Southern Baptist, I could be a snake handler. That doesn't really tell you anything. Same thing if you call me an atheist. Yeah, technically that is true. But what are my values? That comes from humanism. That comes from secular humanism, and just the thought of being compassionate to our fellow, humans and animals that feel sentience. Compassion and reason. Is it true? Is it kind? I mean, those two things. I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, if you have nothing else but those two, those will get you pretty far. And I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
And if, for instance, just not to cut you off, but I know atheists who are complete assholes, and I just can't stand them. I know theists who are the most lovely people, and I adore them. So it's in that sense, I think there is such a thing as atheism. Plus, it's not enough just to be
in his drawer. Look at that.
Atheism, you have to have values. That doesn't mean we have to get them from the place where atheists get their values. Is exactly the same place where theists get their values, except we're getting it from whoever. What I'm trying to say, there is no God. There's no word of God. It's always just been people telling you they're speaking for God. That's where our values come from, and no value is above criticism. We can kick the tires on our values and see if they really hold up. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, if they don't hold up, they're not going to survive, or they're not going to create a society where you'd want to live in. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, I think when I first read about Atheism Plus, I went, oh, okay, so there's this assumption that if I'm not a card-carrying leftist and I don't sign off every check, then I'm a piece of shit and I'm not welcome to this party. And it seems like it should have been more of a discussion.
I've heard the term before. I don't really know what that is, though.
I'm seeing the same sort of religious behavior where people are getting canceled, they're going through these witch trials and being attacked, when it's like, if we're at the table of, okay, our ethics is not determined by scripture, we have to have conversations, and that's hard work, that's not fun, but that's what we have to do. We can't just go, oh, we're just going to be woke 100%, no discussions. If you say anything that's beyond what we've determined is acceptable, we're going to cancel you and attack you online, etc. It just pushes me out,
Yeah. Well, do you feel like, I get the impression that that's where our differences start to come out. What do you think of when you hear the word woke? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think the best way to describe what happened to me is I used to be, especially because I was so concerned with animals, I ended up joining a few organizations. And I joined a few animal organizations. One of them was also into human rights. And I thought that I was...
That's a good question. Chat, how would you describe woke? Super obsessed with diversity and LGBTQ and cancel culture, censorship. What else would you say is woke? To be anti-white? Is that it? Woke equals NGO funded. What else do you guys think? That's a good question. How do you define woke?
On board, because as you said, I have compassion. I'd rather be overly compassionate than deficiently compassionate. It sounds like a good policy to have. It's better that if I'm caring too much or I'm too forgiving within reason than if I am discriminating against people. And then what I saw, they basically were educating me on the system. And one of the systems was called intersectionality. And it took me 2 years to, they were being very vague about it. And then I got it. I went, because I kept trying different things. I was supposed to find times where human rights issues and animal rights issues intersected. And every example I found, they went, no, this isn't it, Kevin, you don't get it. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. And then they had to shape me and say, anything that isn't a straight white male doing something bad, we're not going to post it, Kevin. Because I would find all these examples. I found an example where a Filipino guy was farming women, stealing their eggs and selling them. I went, this is it. This is just like what farmers do. And they're like, but he's a person of color. And I'm like, but he's a man, not enough. They were like, and I'm like, so this is basically reversing the discrimination.
What was this? Because that sounds psychotic to me.
Well, the concept is pretty broad. This is intersectionality. I don't want to specifically call the organization out because they do help animals, but the concept is intersectionality is not that obscure. It is actually pretty popular. And it's this idea that so for example, if an African-American man rapes a white woman, we don't talk about it because that would promote racism. Okay. And I know what they're saying. I know.
Here's the thing, though. Yeah, we do talk about it. We do talk about it. If anyone does anything, we talk about it. That's my impression. Yes, the news stories get shaped, but it's like when I hear Republicans say, well, if Bill Clinton was in the Epstein files,
the mainstream doesn't. A black gets killed, the mainstream is covering it all the time. Black on white crime, it's just another statistic. Barely makes local news.
Yeah, we would. We would want him to go to jail, there's, let me ask you this. And I don't want to say this to put you on the spot, but just as a thought experiment.
Good.
Of all the guests you've had, how many of them have not been straight white males?
I don't even know which one. I've never asked any of them.
Let's break it down. Have any of them not been white? Have any of them not been male?
Yeah. So I had a woman. She has a pseudonym. She covers her face, but she wrote a book about. Let me pull it up. She wrote a book about.
Are there not more men online in general talking about these sort of topics? I mean, I've had girls on the show before.
Dealing with grief.
Okay.
And she has to be on the show, and it was awesome. It was definitely different. But I did have a woman. I can say that.
Well, good. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is like, as a straight white male myself, well, more or less white, more or less straight male. It's easy for me to say, you know,
I don't even know a black girl. I don't know one black girl.
They're not at the table speaking, you know, talking themselves.
Facts. Yeah, I don't know. I there's not like a black girl that I talk to have on the show. The last girl was schizo.
When we're speaking for them, that's when I have a problem with it. And I think, you know, I think it is important to hear the other side. And I think it is important that they're not self-censoring stories about things we don't like. I think most of the problems happening in America right now.
Is there like a bunch of black women that like want to talk about that are online writing books and talking about these issues? That I can't think of any. It's not like there's one that's like really good and he just hasn't had her on because he's not woke enough or something. Get Venti, that's funny. I talked to her, Brittany Venti.
Because we're not getting the truth. We're getting sold a bill of goods. We're getting lied to, and everything we can talk about culture war all we want. That's serving the people who are exploiting us the most. Not to suddenly go Marxist on you, not to suddenly go socialist/communist, whatever that means. But America is turning from a democracy to an oligarchy right before our eyes in real time, and a lot of people have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm glad that it seems the majority of people do have a major problem with that. But our squabbles about, you know, this pink-haired lesbian is trying to tell me what to do.
Actually.
Oh, this redneck, Trump flag waving guy. Like, those aren't the enemies. Those are we are in the same terrarium, and rich people are stirring us up. And I think we have more in common with each other than we don't. No matter who.
Just to make sure that I'm giving her proper advertisement, her name is Betsy DeVille. That's her pseudonym. She has a book about grieving. If any of you guys are dealing with grief and you are not a religious person, check her out. She's got a good book on how to deal with death. And yeah, I understand what you mean. And when you described our government, I am probably even more outraged than you, but when you described it, it doesn't sound like we have the same issue with it. So correct me if I'm wrong. I look at our government. I'm from New York. I'm from
in
California.
Honor of diversity, I think I'm going to have Basil on soon. A brown, Muslim, gay. We need to get our numbers up, our quotas up. We're gonna need to get Basil on. So maybe Fitzgerald will go Jesus deception pilled if I have on a gay brown Arab Muslim, former Muslim. He checks all the boxes. Yeah, Basil, we need you. The token. We need the token on the show.
I see guys like Pete Hegseth using Christianity to forgive our alliance
for
with
objectivity.
Zionism, bombing
DEI
children,
box check.
and all sorts of innocent people, and
like
then invoking these scriptures
show.
that we talk about, which really, to me, demonstrates that we're not talking about Bigfoot and astrology here. We're talking about something that actually kids are being killed because of these words.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll make it a Pride Month special, just like Elijah Schaefer did with Basil. Exactly.
And it's ironic that these guys who are screaming the most about DEI hires.
I've had gay guys on the show before.
Is completely incompetent, unqualified.
Openly gay. The Noahide guy and the Jewish guy that does the street interviews in Israel, the Ask Project, Corey Gil Schuster.
His job that he's kicking out black generals, women generals, people who are far more qualified to do the job.
So take that,
he's a qualified
Fitzgerald.
propagandist, and that he does a magnificent job. Except he's an idiot and he's incompetent and he's pretty vile.
Fitzgerald will be like, "Oh, are you anti-Semitic? Have you had any? How many Jews have you had on your show?" And I'll be like, "A lot, actually. Thank you. So many that my haters call my channel No More Jews. Actually, Fitzgerald. Oh, I could have really turn the tables on Fitzgerald if he tried that one on me.
About what Israel's doing right now and the difference between being anti-Israel, anti-Netanyahu, and anti-Semitic, because those are two very big things. And it's like most American Jews that I know of are horrified by what's being done in their name and the name of their grandparents who survived Auschwitz, only to see a genocide being practiced on the Palestinians. Most Palestinians aren't with Hamas, and even if whatever you think of Hamas, it's like, we're talking about killing children and babies by starvation every day. That's heinous, no matter who they are, what they look like, what language they speak, what God they worship.
Yo, what the
It's so dark.
This is the Mantis Sound sleep mask that is completely blacked out. This has built-in speakers right here that you can adjust to make sure that they're over your ears. Just gonna throw on some ocean waves, put this down, and then I'm ready to go.
I didn't expect blackout like that in my room. That would be awful. And honestly, the sound sealed the deal for me.
So you have these eye cups that...
And that shouldn't be controversial at all. But there's so much in our political situation right now that's so freaking topsy-turvy. I barely know where to start even with that.
Yeah, it's a big topic. I think that my show actually began with an attempt to, I had this very optimistic, ambitious desire to, I had this big plan. It hurts, it breaks my heart to even think about this ambition I had. You can see my first interviews are with rabbis, first Richard Carrier, because he was my favorite atheist author, but then it was instantly, let's talk to all different kinds of people around Judaism. And this was sort of before things got hectic. It was already a big part of my life. I'm from New York. I've grown up with people that were both ethnically, politically aligned or against, and every kind of Jew was in my life. And I figured I was uniquely qualified to, I figured if I could just show the variety and talk with each category, I would come to some sort of
better understanding
conclusion. And what actually kind of happened was, it didn't go to plan. Nothing ever does. Each time I talked to someone in a new category, I didn't get like radicalized, but I got disappointed with each one. So for instance, I talked to Rabbi Weiss, who is an anti-Zionist rabbi, and I was like, this is great. We're gonna show that although I'm not pro-Judaism, I find Judaism to be a serious issue. It's for the same reason that Islam is, similar reasons that all of the Abrahamic religions are an issue. But I was gonna show that this is a harmless guy. Don't associate the atrocities with Israel with this guy. That was sort of my intention. And then at the end of it, I'm like, well, he's basically against Israel because they're atheist. He had no issue with any of he wouldn't really clearly answer the issues with the Talmud and the Torah and all these. So all of the issues with Judaism were resolved.
Interview,
hey, it's better than nothing. I showed that there's a distinction. But I could go through each category. I spoke with a lot of ex-practitioners that left because they were, most of them were leaving Judaism because they were dealing with the sexual issues. They were either homosexual or trans, and they couldn't grapple with that. And that was a whole different thing. And so each category of kinds of Jews that I was speaking to sort of opened my eyes that, okay, I'm not just anti-Zionist. I have an issue with this religion, and I think it's imprinted on them. When I'm speaking to these ex-Jews, I don't think they are inherently evil and born evil, but having this routine of pairing people up for thousands of years, forcing this guy and this woman to make babies, and they're not the only group that's done this. That
absolutely
formed them. And so can I say that it's just about Netanyahu or just about the Torah? Maybe not.
Well, that's the thing. All these things are bound up together in a very thorny, unbreakable thing. And whether we're talking about the American settlement of the United States, whether we're talking about Hindus and Muslims, when we're talking about any group of people, your own family and their crazy uncle you can't stand, and your brother or sister drives you crazy. It's all part of being human. And what drives me crazy is when we have that tendency to label, to stereotype, to lump everybody into a box. And we're all, 300,000 years ago, we were all primates, in the African savannah. We're not that far removed from each other. And it's like when you see that picture of the tiny pale dot, blue dot in that Sagan essay, we are all, 98.9% chimp, and all our cultural differences, all our religions, all our languages, all our political views, those are all new things. We're new things. And we have to learn to get along with each other. And I don't know the answers to any of these things, but I think it's dangerous when we don't want to talk to somebody else, when we already think we've made up their mind about what they are and who they are. When we've been hurt by other people and we tar everybody in that group with the same brush, those are things we have to watch out for. I don't know, I feel stupid for even saying this stuff. It seems so obvious to me, and I feel patronizing to even have to say it out loud. But what else can we do?
Yeah, and I think back to Christianity, there's this idea that, okay, now that I'm not Christian, I have the freedom to, like you said, you have this story time thing. That is something that in traditional Christian culture would be, there were times where you would be burned at the stake for, promoting degeneracy. But then there's also this idea, okay, now that I'm not Christian, if I were to wipe away all of the cultural impact of that, are there any things where I'm being overly forgiving, overly pacifistic? And when I see the behavior of modern Americans tolerating Zionism because of these scriptures, because Jesus says salvation comes from the Jews, I can't help but to think there's actually this opposite issue too, that we're sort of in this kumbaya mode culturally, even as atheists, to this other group. And I don't want to be hateful about it, but I want to address what seems to be a dynamic that's not old. It seems to have been going on for a long time throughout European history, although there was times where they were persecuting the Jewish people. Most of the time they were persecuting the pagans and the heretics, and they were a protected minority. And in the Bible, in these old Christian writings, it says that no, they have their place. They are to be tolerated.
Okay, we're halfway through.
There's been a very back and forth problematic relationship. Like they say, the wars of brothers are the bloodiest, And I think the fact that we've co-opted our culture and our religion directly from this older group. Islam stole it from Christianity and Judaism. Christianity stole their things from Judaism. Judaism stole their things from Persian Zoroastrianism and Canaanitism and Mesopotamian tribalism. Where was I going with that thought?
I'll tell you where I want to take you. Let's go in, and I don't want to make this personal about the person in question. I want it to be about the concept itself.
Okay.
So there was a man who wrote a book that you wrote an article about, and you took issue, and you created a distinction from your worldview from his interpretation. And he is not alone. There's a community of people that think Jesus Christ is not just a myth, but the distinction is so small but such big implications. We are at the table, we're saying Jesus is fake, and then there's this crossroad. We can say, like, you're of the community of the persuasion that says, yeah, Paul is being inclusive, he's letting the Gentiles in, there's no bad intention there, and then we can go right and say it's a complete hoax and psyop. So I want you to really clarify where you go left.
It could still be a deception even if Paul was well-intentioned and what did think he was trying to bring in, save the Gentiles. Here we go, finally getting good. Kevin did this with Carrier, now he's doing it with Fitzgerald. Love it.
And why you don't believe in going right.
Right. Well, let's just put all our cards on the table. We're talking about David Scribina's book, The Jesus Hoax. The thing about people like Scribina and people like Atwill, I think it's ironic that they're mirror images of each other. Atwill is 100% convinced that Christianity was a Roman invention sponsored by Flavius Josephus to control people and make them pro-Rome.
To influence the Jews. So it's the Romans influencing the Jews, whereas Scribina is the Jews influencing.
Convinced that Paul invented Christianity as an anti-Roman psyops, for lack of a better word, and that's what brought down the Roman Empire. They're both crazy nonsense, and they're both seem to be, if you're smart enough to concoct this, especially I think this about Atwill, if you're smart enough to concoct this in the first place, you should know that you are ignoring massive swaths of the evolution of this religion you're talking about and its writings. You should know better. They both should know better. The men that wrote our Bible, and our New Testament especially, but the people who wrote any scripture, they know what they're doing. They are lying, pious fiction, intended to, if not control, at least influence the population. And since Islam and Christianity are the most aggressive religions, by extension, the whole world. And part of the problem with Christianity and Judaism is that you can't have it both ways. If they're Jews, they can't be Christian, and attempts to mix those are infamously, you're either one or the other, basically.
Mutually exclusive.
Messianic Jews notwithstanding. But is that evil? Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is it good to lie to your kids to make them better people? I don't think so.
Wait a second. He just said that it was crazy and then admitted that they lied right after. You guys notice that? Am I tripping? 56. Hold on, let me back this up a little bit. He was like, they're both crazy. I agree, Atwill's is a stupid theory. But then he says that Scribina's crazy and then like confirms exactly what he's saying. He's like, yeah, they lied, they made it up and they lied, but it's just not evil.
By extension, the whole world. And part of the problem with Christianity and Judaism is that you can't have it both ways. If they're Jews...
Hold on, let's hear this. This might be the clip right here.
You should know better. They both should know better. The men that wrote our Bible, and our New Testament especially, but the people who wrote any scripture, they know what they're doing. They are lying, pious fiction, intended to...
So 55 minutes, that's where I gotta write it down, I always forget. Pious fiction. Pious lies, huh?
Not control, at least influence the population. And since Islam and Christianity are the most aggressive religions...
Yeah, they piously invented a lie to get the Gentiles to bow down to the Jewish God. It's pious, though, so it's not evil. Like, does he disagree that, like, the core of Judaism, of having all the nations abandon their religions and worship the Jewish God, does he think that is evil? Or if the Jews think it's good, then it's just good, but he disagrees. Like that's like a philosophical question. If the Jews think that they're doing good by spreading their Torah, can that be evil? They think they're doing good. You could do evil. People could do evil in the name of thinking they're doing something good. Liberal cope.
By extension, the whole world. And part of the problem with Christianity and Judaism is that you can't have it both ways. If they're Jews, they can't be Christian.
Yeah,
and
noble lie.
Attempts to mix those are infamously, you're either one or the other, basically.
Mutually exclusive.
Messianic Jews notwithstanding. But is that evil? Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is it good to lie to your kids to make them better people? I don't think so. And I don't think we have to lie. So I think anybody who's writing scriptures, full stop, whether they're Christian scriptures that made it into the cut into our Bible, or they're Gnostics, if you want to call them that, or any other wackadoodle Christian spin-off that we think of as crazy heretical cults. What's the difference between them at the end of the day? It's that one had political power and one didn't. They're all mixtures of crazy nonsense, common sense, and good ideas, wrapped up in a lot of bad ideas, and just plain bullshit. And that's where I have a problem with all scriptures, with all Christianity, with all Judaism, with all fill-in-the-blankism, is that we don't have to lie to each other to be good people. That's my biggest problem. When you have anybody trying to say that there's a God and I speak for him, she, it, or they, is that you are lying at that point, and it's not helpful.
There we go.
Yes,
that's my line. That's what I always say. So we agree. I've been waiting years. I've read Nailed many years ago. I've never reached out to him. Probably worried that he would like say no, but I've always wondered what he would think about this question, and leave it to Kevin. He finally got him to on the hot seat about it. So he hates lies, and the Bible's a lie, and they lied targeting the Gentiles with this messianic religion. All right? That's all we're saying, dude. That's all it is.
Too far, but I want to address that one last point. There's a lot of we're talking about 2,000 years in a few minutes, so it's always that's why we can always continuously talk forever about it. But as far as can we get people to be good in a sincere way? I want to believe that, and I think a lot of people we could. I think I behave because of without lies. I think you behave without lies. But one of the things, in general, what I'm trying to get at, I've deduced what changed when I was very similar to your worldview, and now that I feel a bit farther out in the outfield, I feel what actually changed is because I'm atheist, I was able to consider genetics to be not only important, but seemingly the most important factor in our behavior. And I also found that in my work with animals. I saw that the difference between Christian
You're gonna make them feast,
and cultural Christian atheist me, and now is that I not only my pursuit of philosophy was met with the acknowledgement that there's only so many pretty words that can influence people to such a small degree for the most part.
Bro, you should have just kept pressing him on the it's a lie. They lied to get the Gentiles to believe in the Messiah, to conquer their pagan gods, to all worship like the supremacist chosen people, jealous Yahweh. Cortisol maxing. Yeah, don't. You just got him to admit to that, and now you're gonna go the race realness. You think this guy's ready for race realness and genetics? Kevin.
We are animals. Like you said, we are primates, and I can train a dog. I'm not using an equivalency here. We are not dogs, but to use another example, I can train a dog. I can train a Chihuahua, and I can train a pit bull, but they are different. And so I think when I was in university and I was
you're
in my
making
little
him
bubble,
sweat.
meeting the best of people, really smart people that qualified for college, I had a very optimistic view of humanity. And then now that I'm a bit older and I've been in the trenches,
like, are you saying blacks are pit bulls? Are blacks pit bulls in that little analogy you just did there? Kevin.
A few times I've seen the depths of humanity, and now I can't co-sign that anymore. This idea that we could just get people to philosophize and use the Socratic method. I'm like, I've met people that seem unfixable.
Let me say something about that. Not to take away from any of that. Just from a personal standpoint, when I was a Christian, I would walk around and see anyone different from me. I was like the Terminator. Oh, saved, unsaved, unsaved. You believe right thing, you're saved. Believe wrong thing, you're not saved. You speak another language, you're probably unsaved. You know, I was so much more xenophobic as a Christian.
Dude, that's smart, dude. You got to keep your head on the swivel. That's smart. Stereotyping can save your life. You're telling me now you walk around and you'll see like a group of thugs and tattooed faces, and their pants are around their knees, and you're gonna look at them and be like, I can't tell if they feel safe or not. I'm not gonna judge a book by its cover. Is that what you do now? Yeah, you turn around, you see them coming, you go to the other side of the street, you go to a different town. He's like, now I don't judge anybody at all. Everybody has the equal likelihood to attack me and rob me. Otherwise, you okay, Kitty? Oh, Kitty fell off her bed. Are you okay, baby? Yeah, white liberal delusion maxing.
When I...
Damn it. Dude, that's so funny.
Got out of there. And
it's like back when I was religious, I used to look around like the Terminator and judge every person, judge the threat level of every person. Dude, you better still do that. I think he lives in Northern California. Like, if you're anywhere near Oakland, you need to have some pattern recognition when you go out, dude. For the sake of you and your family's safety, you need to still keep doing that. He's like, then I became an atheist, and now I just think Everybody's
realized, oh my
the
goodness,
same.
we're all human. I became so much more Christ-like in my acceptance of people.
We're all
and
human.
I find now that where I live, meth and fentanyl are huge problems. There's a lot of crazy-ass people in where I live in Northern California. And I found that when I stopped feeling like my house was Fort Apache, the Bronx, and I was in a siege condition all the time, and we actually got to know the drug addicts in our neighborhood, the drunks in our neighborhood, we started treating them as individuals. Some of them are up, I don't like at all, never will, and some of them are some of the sweetest people I've ever met.
Dude,
and
look at Kevin's face.
It just made me feel safer in my own
wait,
neighborhood.
hold on. You went out and made friends with all the crackheads and the fentanyl addicts in Northern California? Really? That's next level, leftist. This guy's definitely gonna get stabbed. Wow.
All of a sudden. And I don't know, my wife has been the springboard for that because she's like the alpha mother lion of this neighborhood. And if people are in our neighborhood, acting crazy.
Okay. That explains everything. That explains so much. She's the Karen alpha lion of the neighborhood. Dude, I think she's the alpha dog in the house too, in the bedroom. From the sound of things here. This liberal needs Jesus. That's so funny. I shouldn't talk too much trash. I joke around, David. I still want to talk to you about Jesus. But, whoa, bro. Sorry, it's all hitting me at once. I never knew any of this stuff. Chat.
You know something? She'll go right out and start talking to them, and her mom powers are astounding to work on these people that you would not think would have any compunction to to stab her or whatever.
If
Daywalker Jones sent $10, Adam. You gotta pull up a picture of the giant statue Gilgamesh overpowering a lion and pose next to it holding the cat.
Gilgamesh and a lion? Dude, if my wife tried to tell me she's gonna go out and talk to all the meth addicts and the crackheads, around town, I would say, hell no, you're not. Are you crazy? Dude, that's what you need to tell your wife before she gets stabbed by one of these people.
In fact, some of the guys in our neighborhood call her the lion tamer because she will just walk right into it and say, hey, that's not cool. Or hey, how you doing? I'm Dana. Do you need anything? Blah, blah, blah. And the way, all that to say is, I find it's healthier for us to not think that people are like the weather. Most days the weather's fine. Every once in a while you run into a day that will kill you if you're not very, very careful or prepared. People are like that too. For the most part, I think we can be cautiously optimistic about everything, and that includes new people. There are people who are irredeemable. I don't think there are as many out there as we think there are.
One of the gutters that actually sort of radicalized me on that journey was actually living in Oakland. I lived in Oakland, and I didn't just see the sort of depths of humanity in a way. These people that were injecting drugs and had, I saw this parents with their little toddler begging for money.
Wisdom. If he could even tell his wife no without it causing a divorce, yeah. Especially if they have kids. I don't know if they have kids, but like you're gonna go out there and risk.
Money, and both of them ran away, and I just see the toddler standing there amongst junkies. That moment was like such a radicalizing experience, and I wasn't just mad at that and the drugs. I was saying this has developed from the California cultural Christian culture. I was meeting these like extreme liberals that were like, well, we have no good ideas. What are we going to do? And I'm thinking, I come from New York, a place that I thought I was a leftist, and I come to California. I'm like, what's going on here? They're like, well, we don't know what to do. I'm like, you don't know what to do. Well, what do you? They're everywhere. There's these campgrounds of junkies everywhere. You're giving them free money. And so I can't help but attribute that to cultural Christianity, and that's what I'm sort of talking about. I'll give you an example in Europe. I haven't fact-checked this, but I found this is like a really good example of an extreme example. A Rwandan immigrant, Emmanuel, I guess I can't pronounce it right, saw his asylum application in France rejected.
This guy bragged about his wife being the lion tamer of the meth head neighborhood. I cannot believe I just heard that. That is seriously next level.
Despite the deportation orders, he remained in the country illegally in France. The priest entrusted him with the keys to the cathedral, tasking him with closing and caring for the building.
I avoid those people like the plague.
Destroying the organ and the choir. The priest didn't believe it was him, so they allowed him to stay at his home, offering him shelter while awaiting his trial because they thought he was innocent. Then he murdered the priest.
Yeah.
And so this is an extreme example.
Yeah.
But this
sounds like a very extreme example.
Christianity.
It sounds like the kind of example that Trumpers pull out and say, look, see? And meanwhile, there's thousands of people coming in who have made America a better place, just like that guy, but who aren't insane assholes.
Right. But the forgiveness that we're saying.
Yeah, but it happens.
I think there's a better way than just saying, oh, what can we do? And bleeding heart, that stereotype that I get from the right, it just drives me crazy. Because mostly, and I'm not saying this about you, but mostly it's a self-serving rhetoric from people who the haves to the have-nots. Because, and I'll say something else about that. In countries that are so-called socialist, and I'm not talking about communist or Marxism, but in countries where they actually...
I thought I was like, all right, here we go. Here comes the clip. We're talking Jesus. Finally, he's getting pressed on like the hoax, deception, idea. And now we're talking about, now we're talking about his wife taming all the crackheads with pineapple Kool-Aid spears. That would work. Yeah, that's her trick. The lion tamer with the Kool-Aid pickles. He's triggered. Yeah, he is getting triggered. Uh-oh.
Provide for their citizens.
If you have been considering switching your dog to a new food, here are 3 green flags to look out for with a new dog food. Green flag number 1 is that you want to make sure that the food was developed.
You see so much less of any of that kind of stuff.
Well, we definitely, I've lived in both. I've lived in America and in Europe, and I can say that by far it's safer when you give people free things. Definitely, you definitely eliminate.
And I'm not talking about free things, but let me stop you for a second, because it's not about.
Are we trying to pretend like the likelihood of getting like stabbed or hurt or robbed by some homeless crackhead is not exponentially higher than just like some random person, some random regular person? This is annoying.
Getting people free things, and if anybody in America is getting free things, it's the billionaires and the wealthy who are getting massive tax breaks that are insanely stupid. And this shouldn't even be controversial to say that your local nurse and barista shouldn't be paying more in taxes than your Winco, your Walmart store, or your billionaire. There should be. It's just crazy. If monkeys were hoarding like that, we would say there was some kind of aberrant thing wrong with it. Elon Musk does it. We're saying, oh, Elon, great. Go steal another company and take credit for it.
I definitely agree with you that there's more money being sort of scammed in the high echelons. I definitely agree with that. But both can be a problem, and there's definitely it doesn't make the other good. So yeah, there's white collar crime, but that doesn't make it okay to sort of. It's very hard for me to describe, but I acknowledge what you're saying. I understand.
Again, I don't want to say this is black and white and it's super obvious and easy. It's not. There's people facing real problems, including mental problems, and there are people who should not be walking around free. They should be locked up. Anyway, go ahead.
So
thank you. That's all we're saying.
Is it makes it so back when we read in the early days, there was almost a sense that they are a third race. There are the Greeks. Actually, no, there was four. There was four actually described. There were the barbarians, just total wild people. Then there were the chosen people. Then there are the pagans, and then the Christians were in between the two. They were, and so it was a way of erasing ethno-nationalism. There was no paganism. Always had this sort of ethnic identity embedded, and Judaism has that. So Judaism was like the pagan religions, where they all had like Romans were Roman. They're not, and this is the essential foundation to this idea that Christianity, regardless of the words we want to use for it, hoax, psyop, myth, it had that impact. And when I read your article, sort of dismissing Serbina's idea, one of the things, just to use one example of something that I wanted to push back on, is you went, oh well, it couldn't have caused the fall of the Roman Empire because. And then you assume that the post-Rome, divided Rome was still Rome. And I'm like, no, he was more saying the initial pagan Rome fell.
But here's the thing, though. He's saying that Paul set out to destroy Rome and did. Nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing. And it's funny because he recently wrote a response to...
No. A response, yeah? In quotes, response. You don't have to put quotes up for a response. I don't like that. That's woke. Going, oh, he wrote a response. Oh, you wrote an article? You wrote a review? Hold on, I forgot the point I was going to say.
Was still Rome. And I'm like, no, he was more saying...
Oh, yeah. Paul didn't want to... He probably didn't plan to destroy Rome, although that's what the Messiah was ultimately supposed to do. It was to theologically conquer Rome with the belief in the Messiah and the God of Israel instead of the pagan gods. That's the argument. Not that it would make Rome dissolve and break up. That's never been my argument.
Pagan Rome fell.
But here's the thing, though. He's saying that Paul set out to destroy Rome and did. Nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing. And it's funny because he recently wrote a response to the article. And one of the things he says, oh, you should read The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbons. Maybe you're doing something. That book was written in the 1700s. It's like, it is so freaking out of date. And it's been so debunked. And he's ignoring everything that's come out in the last 50 to 30 years of scholarship about things that are settled already. And he's going back there and acting as if he just discovered something new. He's
what
so
things, though? What things? What things?
So many things.
If I were to say that,
so many things. Like what? So you're saying Christianity didn't have anything to do with the fall? I don't think anybody's saying it's the only reason Rome fell, but facts don't lie. It was pagan for a long time. It existed, it became Christian, and it ended up falling shortly after that.
Named Karl Marx led to the collapse of the Russian Empire. That would sound ridiculous if it wasn't true.
Yo,
and
Boneyard
Karl
with
Marx
the hundo. Thank you, Boneyard. 44 Boneyard with the hundo. Appreciate the many years of high IQ work. What a compliment. Thank you. Thank you. It is high IQ. I'm glad a fellow high IQer can recognize that. So sick of these low IQ anti-Semites. These low IQ, low quality goyim, and their kosher conspiracies. Thank you, Boneyard. Late night, Friday crew, let's go.
About what would happen in Pyongyang or what would happen in Cuba. He didn't know the whole master plan, but he had an intention. He made an ideology with that intention, and it led to something. So I don't think Paul knew absolutely what would happen, but his intention echoed, and it had that implication. His form of Christianity, this idea of erasing your national identity, had a huge impact on the original Roman Empire. Obviously, there were other post-Roman empires.
His simplification of all those things is so infantile as to be ridiculous. That's
what?
I don't like Paul. I don't particularly like Christianity.
Hold on, why? Why is it bad to simplify an argument? Why is that bad? Simplified. Paul conceived of a mythical Messiah that he sold to the Gentiles to replace their pagan gods with the God of Israel. Is that too simple? Is it wrong? Calling something simple is not an argument.
There's good things you can, diamonds in the dunghill.
It's Saturday? What did I say? Did I say Friday night stream? What did I say? It's still Saturday for me. What did I say? Did I say Friday? Sorry, I was just so overwhelmed with the happiness of getting a hundo on the late night stream. It was too simple for simple minds, yeah. You don't say it's so simple, so it's wrong. Like, that's not an argument. He simplifies it too much. Okay, let's hear the nuance that he's missing. Hold on, I want to back it up. 110:40 will do.
Those things is so infantile as to be ridiculous. That's the thing. I don't like Paul. I don't particularly like Christianity. There's good things you can, diamonds in the dunghill, as Thomas Jefferson said. I'm just opposed to the anti-Semitism that's just dripping in that book. And the fact that he's a bad actor, the fact that he says, what got me to publish that was the fact that it came out that he is...
What is this?
We are
that was weird.
Finally ready to show off.
What is this shit?
AUK Mini 2, completely redesigned and made better.
That's crazy.
But as far as the quote...
What was that about? Hold on, he's mad about the anti-Semitism in the Bible? The Bible, it says that Jews are chosen and the oracles of God and salvation comes from the Jews. Hey, if you want to get mad at Jews, at the Bible being anti-Semitic, blame the Jews. Is it not the Jews that wrote it, or he's going to say the Gentiles added in a bunch of anti-Semitic stuff? It may have been a Gentile that added in the interpolation in Thessalonians where they say Paul said the Jews killed Jesus and are suffering the utmost or whatever, like the temple being destroyed.
Being the National Socialist. I mean, that's something that even your buddy Richard Carrier has done, except
there's a huge difference saying, this is what the Nazis are saying, and what should we think? Well, here's what these Nazis say. It's like, we're not gathering their opinions to inform our decisions the way this guy is. And again, the fact that he's dishonest about it. He's either incompetent...
Hold on. We're not gathering our opinions. We're not gathering our opinions from Germans or anybody to... It's like he's saying, you're only saying this because the Nazis said stuff like this. That's not the argument. It's, hey, we're noticing this, and oh, look, some other people noticed this before. That's what it is. 111.4. Hold on, I gotta see this. Now we're getting good.
Oh, here's what these Nazis say. It's like, we're not gathering their opinions to inform our decisions the way this guy is. It came out that he is...
But as far as the quoting the National Socialists, I mean, that's something that even your buddy Richard Carrier has done. Except
there's a huge difference saying, this is what the Nazis are saying, and what should we think? Well, here's what these Nazis say. It's like, we're not gathering their opinions to inform our decisions the way this guy is. And again,
hold on. So you're not allowed to say, if somebody in history said Jesus is a myth and it Judaized the world, or like quotes that Nietzsche says, like they're worshiping a Jew and Mary and Jesus. So you're not allowed to cite them because you don't like them, or because somebody you don't like said something somebody else isn't allowed to say, hey, they noticed that. It's such a weak take. That's the criticism. I don't even know what he's talking about. Did Skrbina like quote a Nazi or something in his book? Oh, and by the way, a Nazi even said this. So what, does that automatically make it wrong or something? Or are we going to judge the argument or the quote like if it's true? Like you get Jews citing Mein Kampf. I've seen Jews say, "Oh, Hitler said in Mein Kampf." They say that all the time.
The fact that he's dishonest about it. He's either incompetent with the sources he's using, not just talking about the Nazis, but the other sources, or he's deliberate. And it's like, at some point, it doesn't matter whether he's being deliberate or he's just that stupid. At some point, you just have to say, okay, we're done with this.
Deliberate or stupid about what? What do you... This is David Fitzgerald. He wrote Nailed. They're talking about Skrbina. Uh-oh, we're getting up in our seats, huh, Kevin? He's not giving any details. I don't even know what he's talking about.
But here's another good point that you're bringing up. So and this is something that both you, Carrier, and a few others have done. You acknowledge that a group can have a bad reputation, and therefore we should, by default, assume they're not being honest. So if I said, "Hey,"
and what causes a bad reputation? It's their actions that they've done.
Right. So if I were to give an example, "Hey, David Fitzgerald, did you know that the Kremlin announced today that this happened?" You would say, "I don't." Whatever I said the Kremlin announced this. You would say they have a bad reputation. Almost everything we've ever investigated to what this group has said is deceptive. Therefore, I will take very big caution.
It's not like Skrbina goes, this Nazi said this about Jesus, so that makes it true, and that's where I got my argument. There's nothing like that. So I don't even know what this is about.
And actually maybe even assume that it's deception. In the same way that you're doing that for the Germans of a particular era, why can't we, and this is sort of what Skrbina is trying to do also on the list of things he's trying to do, why are we not allowed to do that for the practitioners of Judaism? And this is something where you well, technically you are, except there seems to be a strategic switch off sometimes. So, I mean, every time you've looked into a myth that these ancient Israelites, I know you argue that we don't know if all of them were Jewish, but every time we've looked into it, it's a lie.
Yeah. Right.
So when we get to these original 7 letters, why shouldn't we assume this is also a lie? They have a bad reputation.
Here's the thing. Well, there's a difference between a forger writing whatever he wants and signing it by somebody else's name, and that same guy writing whatever he wants.
This is Pocket. I never go anywhere without it.
Pocket.
At the tap of a button, it records and creates organized notes based on your conversations. I use it at work, at the doctor's, and
AI?
when I'm out and about. I could use an app, but it's effortless.
Dude, Amalek
Pocket does things no other app can do.
Like this.
Inside, it has a contact mic. So when I snap it to the back of my phone, I can listen to both sides of a call. No speakerphone needed.
What?
Because no one wants to be that person.
Okay.
What the lie isn't just that it's a forgery. If Paul said every single word to every single letter that he wrote, it'd still be a lie because he's making shit up, because he's like every other religious writer. He's having weird experiences. He says he got his gospel from his Bible study and from visions, just like everybody else on the planet has done. There's nothing special about him. I'm not letting Paul off the hook. I'm not letting anybody in the Bible off the hook. Most of the Bible, the vast majority of the Bible, is made up that never happened. Now, if you want to call that evil, yeah, I agree. That's evil. Are they bad people? Are all Christians / Jews / Muslims bad people? That I don't know. That follows.
Let's go. All right. Hold on. I like that again. 115. It's bad. He hates it. There's
nothing special about him. I'm not letting Paul off the hook. I'm not letting anybody in the Bible off the hook. Most of the Bible, the vast majority of the Bible, is made up that never happened. Now, if you want to call that evil, yeah, I agree. That's evil. Are they bad people?
Made up bullshit that never happened. It's evil. And he's going to go, oh, are Christians evil? Are Muslims evil? Well, they're not the ones that created the lie and got the lie moving. One. And also, yeah, I do think a lot of these pastors are evil. They're, especially the ones that don't believe and they shill anyway, or they grift and shill Jesus. Yes, but they're just like been duped. They're not the ones creating the lie, knowingly lying. That's less evil. Knowingly lying is more evil than some Christian today that just sincerely believes and was indoctrinated. So there's your answer there.
Are all Christians / Jews / Muslims bad people? That I don't know if that follows. But they're definitely operating on a bad faith. They're letting that inform their decisions and their actions. And like I think it was Niebuhr said, religion tends to make good people better and bad people worse. That's how I feel about that. And I think that's the more important question is what you're teaching, what you're saying, is this making the world a better place or not? I think that's because, yeah.
We're at the junction of myth
Another
versus
one,
hoax.
Boneyard? Oh my God, thank you, Boneyard. Another thumbs up, dude, incredible. Thank you. Boneyard, I'm gonna have to start streaming this late every night if this is when Boneyard comes out. I don't even think I've ever seen a dono from Boneyard. Dude, Boneyard, where have you been all my life? Whoa. Boneyard's the VIP tonight.
How we should feel about this information. We're not arguing that. We don't have that much of a difference over.
Dude, I'm getting the luck. I'm getting the privilege to watch my friend Kevin grill David Fitzgerald on these, and he basically already conceded to all of it, pretty much. While trying to like put up resistance, he still conceded to all of it. And then getting monster donos from Boneyard. Still got 150 people in the chat. It's late as hell. I love it.
Seems to have happened. We have a general semblance of how this developed. But then, to me, what I still don't get is, after talking to you, after talking to Carrier, who seems to be you have very similar perspectives. So I don't mean to pile on you, but this is a conversation I've had so many times. And what I still don't get is how today I look out the window when I'm in America. I look on the news. I look at my dad looking at Fox News. There's a commercial saying, Christians, you need to donate to Israel. I see Donald Trump with the yarmulke praying to a Israeli monument. I see this relationship between Christians and the chosen people. We are bombing children. And then I go, okay, let's look at the beginning. And I see a guy saying, I have a special gospel for the Gentiles. And I'm like, I read what you're reading. And then I see today. And then I look a little bit in between. And I'm like, I understand they don't have complete control over Christianity the whole time. I don't think they need to. There was a cult in California where the woman died and the cult used her body as like a sculpture. They decorated her with Christmas lights. A cult can keep going. It doesn't need to be controlled. I think what I see it as, it had this intention and it took a life of its own. And now it was strategically built perfectly. I don't think Paul knew 2,000 years from now that we would have Netanyahu and this insane situation that we both agree is an outrage. We're both
absolutely
in agreement that.
And just as outrageous as Hamas doing their attack on October 7th. If Israel handled things differently, I would be ranting about how evil Hamas is today.
Face there is like,
and now it's so eclipsed by what's happening in Israel that I barely have time to talk about anything except, well, Trump is what sucks up most of my bandwidth on social media today, because he's actively trying to destroy this democracy. He's actively trying to, it's a criminal in the White House. And until we get him out, nothing's going to be right. Nothing is going to be right in this country.
Is this a coincidence? Did we get here by accident? Like,
well, no, here's the thing.
That's the difference between myth and hoax, is that we're saying this wasn't an accident. It didn't just happen like this by chance. It seems to have been the initial intention for Christianity to have this role.
Right. And we could be talking about any number of other religions, and we could see the same effect of this accelerant. It's like, seriously, pick any religion, and you can find things like that going on. Eastern religion and Western religion, you'll find reasons.
Yeah, but there's only one religion that's done this, taken over the last 1,700 years. So to be like, well, all religions do this, it's kind of like what other religions done this in the West? What do you mean? There's only one that's conquered. The religion that was all about conquering the nations conquered the nations. You can't be like, well, they're all like that.
The question of whether it was a hoax or a myth, at the end of the day, maybe that's not the important question. It's what do we do now? Are we going to allow this myth or this hoax to dictate our policies? The fact that this was an apocalyptic cult.
The future of human longevity starts here. Introducing the Hume Band 2.0, the world's...
And that there's so many Americans salivating the thought of, oh, if we nuke Israel, that's going to bring Jesus back. It's like this doomsday toxicity has poisoned what good might have come out of religion, you know.
like I said earlier, these cults are always trying to look for control. They adapt to get as much control as possible. And one of the factors that allows them to have control is urgency. And so we look throughout history, and there's a cyclical, each crazy moment in history, World War I, World War II, before that, there are Christians and other Abrahamic leaders saying, this is it. This is what we were saying. This guy, Napoleon is the Antichrist.
Napoleon's
this guy,
the Antichrist.
Prussia,
Bill the Hun's the Antichrist. Boom, boom, boom.
And Prussia is, this guy's the Messiah. And so, like, we're just in this consistent grift of this much urgency, and they thrive on catastrophe. But now these people it's different now, because back then it was dudes with muskets and swords and then guns. Now there are flying robots with guns that are AI driven. I have a drone. It's AI driven. It knows me. It follows me around. Just looking at it, I'm like, we're screwed. We are not philosophically
we are living in a Black Mirror technology.
Our technology is here. Our philosophy is here, because there's been no reason to become good people. We've only profited when we created great technology. We have very primitive, archaic people. Their philosophy is down here, and now they have an AK-47 and a cell phone and a drone, and there's this emergency, and I don't even know the first step.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, you've succinctly wrapped it up very nicely. It is a messed up situation. One thing the least we can do is not take it sitting down and keep pushing back, because we are winning that fight. There's all these prisons, these warehouses that the Trump administration want to turn into concentration camps, and every single one of them has been shot down because people pushed back. These are not smart guys. They're smart in the way of a car salesman or a they're diabolical, but they're not smart. They're not well educated. They're not likable people. They all hate each other. They're a bunch of venal treason weasels, and the cracks are showing, and the cracks will come. But we have to stay strong until then and keep pushing back and not give up, not get into cynicism and say, oh, it's hopeless, and throw up our hands. We've got to keep pushing. And as you say, it doesn't matter if it's a Jew, a Christian, a Palestinian, a Muslim. It's like whenever we see injustice and somebody justifying it, we have to call them out on that. And whether that's a right-winger talking about leftists being panty-waist about, or a leftist pointing out right and saying, you're full of shit, you're just doing this for the money. All these things are valuable. All these things are good. And again, at the end of the day, I think all of us have more in common with each other than we don't. And it's about talking to the other side. It's about seeing where your disagreements are. And you won't agree on everything. That's not possible. But what you can agree with, what you can live with. I don't know how to fix the junkies in my neighborhood. I don't. But I know how to keep them from messing up. If they break a window, I want them to go to jail for it. If I see a single mom with her baby and they've got no options, I'm going to reach out and help them. And even if it just means giving them a couple bucks, even if it just means talking to them and treating them as human. It's small, it's pathetic, but it's all we've got.
Confirmed. He said he'll talk to anybody, right? Didn't he say that? Maybe I should ask him to come on. I won't even argue politics with him. He can take care of as many meth heads in his neighborhood as he wants to. I'm not going to stop him. I won't even bring it up. I just want to talk Jesus.
And at the end of the day, sometimes it's enough. Sometimes it's more than enough.
He's just
reminds me of a line I saw when working at a bird sanctuary. You can't save the world, but you can save somebody's world.
Absolutely.
And that always made me feel good when I could save one or try. So I want to finish
He's
this.
He's just a bleeding heart liberal that just wants to take care of all the homeless crack mamas and their babies.
A question from another scholar, an author, the one we've been talking about. He left me a question, if I could ask you. It's an academic question. I asked him, because he was my last guest, and I asked him privately if he had a question for you. And it's a very tame question about Jesus Christ. And so I'd like to pose his question, complex. And then that's the closest thing we can get to having you talk to each other. Okay. So apparently he supports the, quote, celestial Jesus theory, in which Jesus was said to be a pre-existing divine being who existed since the beginning of time. He lived in heaven, fought bad guys in heaven, got defeated in heaven, was crucified in heaven, quote, died and went somewhere, parentheses, hell, question mark, got raised back up to heaven and lives there today. This same Jesus now promises eternal life to all believers. And of course, all of this was made up by someone. So my question is, who made up this myth? When? Why? What was the motive? What did they hope to achieve? What did they believe it themselves? So they lied, right? And who in their right mind, who would expect such a story to be persuasive to the Gentiles? Seriously? And so this is a big question, but I guess try to take a...
It is a big question, and it's going to open a whole other can of worms. But when I look at Christianity, specifically Christianity, it appears to have been part of this evolution that I talk about in the book, Playing God, by the way, where after Alexander the Great, specifically, after he unites all of the known world, most of the known world, under a single banner, you get this creation of a cosmopolitan empire. And we see it happening in other places, like in China, in Greece, and other places. But you get this situation where now you have a God that's not just of one people or one city-state or one country, but of multiple countries and multiple cultures and multiple races and multiple languages. And as that happens, your God, and this is like step 5 or 6 along a 7-part evolutionary stage, gets more and more transcendent and more omnibenevolent, and where he's the God of everybody, he's the God of everything. He's not just the river God or the stone God or the mountain God, forest God. He's the God of everything and created everything. And we all are his children. And after that, you start going from pantheons to the idea of a personal God, a savior God that lives in our hearts. And in Egypt, that became the Isis cult. In Greek, it was Eleusinian myths originally. Anatolia, Mithras, all these gods. Everything in Christianity, early Christianity, looks like it's just the Jewish version of that.
Baccarat Rouge 540, you've seen the dupe for this all over TikTok.
Sounds like Neil.
It's the Alt 23 Crystal. Here's my opinion.
So far.
Yeah, Moses never talked about a demigod. We don't see anything like that in the Old Testament. But as soon as this idea is showing up in the Hellenistic world, boom, all of a sudden, oh yeah, our God has a human, half-human demigod son too. And he's a savior God. And he lives in your heart. And like those other guys, we have a Lord's Supper. Like these other guys, we do baptism. And we have all these sacred rituals. And Paul, even his vocabulary, is very clear that he's describing a mystery faith. That's where I think Christianity came from. So it's not even just Paul, and we know Paul didn't create Christianity. He's just the one dude that people like Marcion later fixed on. And he didn't think, in his letters, he's describing Apollos of Alexandria, he's talking about all these rival apostles who preach another gospel, another Jesus. So there wasn't one single Christianity, there wasn't one single Jesus, there wasn't one single Paul. This was part of a bigger movement. And it was done the same reason that they all were done. The same reason every religion's made. So I know that just, again, opens a whole other can of worms and doesn't really answer the question, but that's where
it doesn't answer the question at all. It's still the Ebionites, James, Peter, John, Paul, as far as we know, are the first ones that believed in this Jesus figure as we know him as Jesus. And they were Jews. And they were trying to, make Noahides of the nations? Try to spiritual warfare against Rome? Religious battle? That's the answer to the question.
I think the closest we can get to the origins of Christianity are.
And a quick response to one aspect of what you said is, and this is my theme. I'm always just my theme is always trying to remind people that what we see in Christianity, the Jesus part was added in, but a lot of the behavior of Christianity was already a part of Judaism. And one example is the mikvah, which was a ritual where they would immerse people in water. And they would do this for Gentiles. And so they had this sort of ritual that looks just like baptism in pre-Christian Judaism. And so I always emphasize this because I think that's one of the differences between seeing it as this harmless myth and then this hoax. I'm more leaning toward the hoax because to me, it's part of Judaism sort of strategy. It's part of policy. All of the things we see in Christianity are the Noahide rules. If we go through the Talmud, which is based on the oral Torah and older traditions, they talk about what the rules for the Gentiles are, and we see all of these mirrored. And one of the ones that I couldn't find, I found it in the book of Thomas. The rule that Gentiles are not allowed to eat sacrificed animals, they had that in one of these lost gospels. And so to me, Paul is not a maverick. He's not someone that's just making this new thing up. He's being typical. He's forming it based on the linear plan for Judaism. Judaism has a plan. It's building up to something. It's built to do that. And that's why I see it as a hoax.
Do we have time to push back on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I think the thing that saying that Judaism or really any other religion has a plan, that is a little problematic to me because all religions are evolution in action. They're constantly spinning off and shooting off things. John the Baptist, let's talk about him for a second because John the Baptist came out of that mikvah tradition in Judaism. He was his own thing, and assuming this is a real dude. If not, we're talking about his cult, if not he himself.
Yeah, Judaism has a plan. And I write about this in the book, a whole chapter about prophecy, about how prophecy is whatever people say prophecy is, whatever they say and believe it is. So they're interpreting the prophecy based off the scriptures. The scriptures aren't always clear, but there's definitely clear enough. They're motivated by some prophecy, some agenda of the nations all worshiping their God at the simplified way to explain it.
But one of the reasons I think there might have been a real John the Baptist, maybe, is that we have slightly better evidence for him than Jesus outside of their own writings. John appears in all the Gospels, though they can't agree on what his relationship with Jesus is. It's different in every single of our four Gospels. And what seems to be, Robert Price once posed this as a thought experiment, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's like, first time I heard it, I thought it was ridiculous. But he says, okay, we know Jesus.
This is an Atheism Plus space, and this is a safe Atheism Plus atmosphere. We're not allowed to talk about Robert Price.
Fair enough.
Canceled.
Good one.
Where was I going with that?
Sorry, Robert Price. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sometimes. We're talking about stuff.
Funny.
Just for the record, I love Robert Price. I always have, and it breaks my heart that we can't see eye to eye on race and politics. But that said,
you
John
love
the Baptist,
him, huh? He wrote a really mean thing about Price when during his cancellation. I remember.
He's in the Gospels. They can't agree on who he is. It's obvious Jesus is a mouthpiece for the John the Baptist cult because they're constantly bumping into each other and having debates on why your followers do this, my followers do that, kind of thing. he says, we know Jesus is a myth. We know it's an allegory. Is Jesus himself an allegory for John the Baptist? And that's one of those things that seems ridiculous to me, but I could totally, the more I think about it, the more I could see that everything we think we know about Jesus is really a spin-off from another spin-off of Judaism. And I don't think anybody, let alone the ancient Jews, let alone the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all the different, the therapeutic, all those different Jewish sects who hated each other, and they didn't have a plan. There wasn't any teleological goal in mind. The Pharisees that we see in the Bible are a total caricature.
Hold on. To say that there's no goal in Judaism, there's not one monolithic, like, authoritative, like, it's a meme. Think of it like a meme, prophecy memes. Was there not messianic expectations in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes? They're all waiting for a Messiah to come and conquer the Romans, to rule the world. What I would say.
Life, the Pharisees would have loved somebody like Jesus, because like them, he hated those fat cats in the temple in Jerusalem who were Roman toadies. They would have loved somebody like that. And in fact, most of the teachings that Jesus gives, many of them come straight from the Pharisees. Anyway, that being said, John the Baptist's cult, it was another spinoff from these things. And what if our Christianity is just another spinoff from John the Baptist's cult? It's something I can't prove, but it seems very compelling to me. And it also goes against the idea that there's some foreshadowing, it's like the people who invented Judaism in the first place wasn't just one dude. It was many dudes writing together all these separate Canaanite traditions and Zoroastrian theology and combining those and trying to make like this tribal epic that starts with one guy, Abraham, and goes all the way, well, Adam even, but goes all the way to today. And it's all made up. And
right, it's like the same pattern as European dialects, where like in France there were all these different dialects, and then it sort of gets consolidated into the Parisian version, and the same thing happens with these.
Dude, we're watching at 1.75.
And one of my guests, Marcus Vincent, I'm sure you've heard of him. He was like, this idea that there was Judaism at the time. You actually said this too today. It was so mixed up that there wasn't one to talk about.
Right.
Are you trying to feed your dog better but stuck between overpriced fresh food and low quality kibble? Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Lift.
Right, exactly.
Dude, David's saying that like there's no plan, there's no agenda. Like we read all the verses. We can see in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then also later in Christianity and in Judaism, all the scrolls, all the scriptures they view as messianic, speaking about a future time, and it's like ruling the Gentiles, conquering the Gentiles, the Gentiles bowing down. Like that's the agenda. It's in my book. I need to send David my book. What's the worst that could happen? He gives it, he donates it to one of the crackheads in the neighborhood. They probably believe in Jesus. They need it too.
We look at the ones today, and I've spent a lot of time looking at rabbis talk, and of course I look for the most radical, crazy rabbis to look at. I'm not going to bore myself and look at the tame ones, but the radical ones do say that there's a plan. They say it's all going to plan. There's a Mag and Magog war, and they say, here it is, Iran and US, this is it, and it's going to, and so the Talmud says there's going to be a world to come where the righteous Goyim who follow the 7 Noahide laws will survive.
Yeah, third temple, Moshiach rules the world.
Look out the window, look at my boomer dad donating to Israel because he believes in Jesus, and then you tell me, nah, it's just a myth. It's hard for me,
But here's the thing. Radical. Here's the thing. Every generation of a religion loves to play that game of rebooting their own traditions and make it look like this has always been the thing from the get-go. Christians do it. Oh, they all do it. They all do it. When in the 70s, when they were talking about the rapture, nobody taught that in the Bible. Nobody taught the Trinity in the Bible. The more stuff you pile on, they keep one of the things they pile on is, and this goes back all the way to the beginning, and that's where the comes in. I mean, it's but be careful about saying the real Judaism, the real Christianity comes from this one source over here. That never is. It never goes back to the one. It always goes back to the many. And the further you go back, the less it looks like
the Torah.
What you're talking about.
It all goes back to the Torah, and we can read the Torah verses. We can read the Tanakh. And it's not even up to much interpretation. It's clear as day what it says.
That resembled this, that is no longer here, isn't going to be my biggest concern. I'm going to be concerned with what actually
this
is
guy needs to read chapter 4 about prophecy.
To craziness. But to use the best example I've found, I've tried to really, when we look at how Buddhism became very popular in Eastern Asia, it comes out of the subcontinent, and because it's exotic, because it's another, you're able to idealize it. Just like typical California ladies now, they get really into yoga, and what's it called, Asia philia? There's like this it's so exotic that it becomes this romantic thing, and a lot of they end up going to India and they go, okay, it's not exactly what I had in mind. The same that I understand that there could be an innocent
he knows India is poopy.
It comes from a different place, comes to Europe from an exotic land, and because it's different, it's popular. But
India.
the distinction between what I see in Buddhism in Eastern Asia and the Abrahamic religions in Europe, and etc., in the colonies we've created since then, is they created the Santa Claus secondary religion for us. We don't. Buddhism is Buddhism in India and in Eastern Asia, whereas we get this like Goyim Santa Claus character, Jesus. And then I was just in Prague. If you go to Prague, I've never seen a stark example of the relationship. You go on the Jewish quarters, it's Ferraris and Porsches and the most amazing things. And then I go to, and then you see the Catholic and the Protestant churches, and you find out that they were loaning money to the churches. They were never able to pay back, and there is this crazy relationship. And I'm not trying to spread hate about this, but I need some of you guys on the left side to admit, okay, there's a problem here. We can disagree on how it happened, but can we acknowledge that there is this relationship?
Well, sure, there is a relationship, sure. But like for every rich Mercedes Hollywood producer Jew that you can think of, think how many like peasants in Krakow were being harassed. And the fact that they could lend money to the church was especially because Christian doctrine would not allow Christians to do it. They were in this damned if you do, damned if you don't position of, well, you're going to hell anyway, so you can lend money. And
we're implying that they wrote that. So on the hoax, I'm speaking for the hoaxers, we're saying that they did that.
Well, no, they may have flicked the first domino, but by the time you get to that, I mean, and again, the wars of brothers are the bloodiest, you know.
Right.
Don't, what am I trying to say? It feels like anytime we start talking about Judaism today, the first thing we do is we look at the most extreme examples. It's like, yeah, not all Jews are driving Porsche. Not all Persians in LA are driving Porsches, but you know, these stereotypes exist for a reason, but what of it? It's like, there's a lot of weird wealth inequalities in our world, and you can't all train it back to Jew versus Christian, you know.
Well, we can talk forever. I'll talk whenever you want to. I've had a great time. I want to keep on talking, but I know that you have a life to live. You've pulled me 1 centimeter to the left. But, you can still have to work harder. I hope I maybe got you a little bit on the hoax side, just a little bit. But I hope anyone watching thinks for themselves.
He shook his head. We score. Not all Jews, Fitzgerald. Of course not. Hey, he shook his head. Did you see the head shake? Hold on. 141.40. We gotta go. We got a confirmation. He's down. Maybe I should send him an email.
There we go.
Keep thinking. Be a good person. Common sense. Don't be evil. Whatever that means.
Be evil. Yeah.
You know. And that's any final words for the people?
That sums up really nice.
You've pulled me 1 centimeter to the left, but you can still have to work harder. I maybe got you a little bit on the hoax side, just a little bit. But I hope anyone watching thinks for themselves.
There we go.
Keep thinking. Be a good person. Common sense. Don't be evil. Whatever that means.
Be evil. Yeah.
You know. And that's any final words for the.
All right. Very interesting. I'm glad we watched that. I needed to watch that whole thing. It happened a month ago, and I finally got to it. I'd like to debate. You could frame it as a debate so he doesn't get cold feet about being canceled or anything. But I'm gonna ask Kevin for the contact. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for those big donos. Came through earlier. Super VIP Boneyard, appreciate you. Savior too, coming in with the late nights, and a bunch of others. The rest disappeared now. If you haven't already signed up for the Substack, the link is in the description below. For the book club private Zoom calls, going over my book right now. We're gonna keep doing it. More content after we're done with my book. And I will be back on Monday. Already have a bunch of material and clips and stuff to go over on Monday. So thanks everybody for hanging out, staying up late, watching this stuff with me. And leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, clip. And you know what to do. And you guys have a nice night. And I will see you. Grace is up this late.
$20. Love the chill streams. Great stream.
Thank you. Was I chill, Grace? I'm trying to be chill. Trying to cortisol max. Let's see, what are we at here? Are we chilling? 57. That is super chill. That's like sleep heart rate. My sleep heart rate. Grace is chill. I'm chill. We're all chill. All right. You guys chill tomorrow, and I'll see you on Monday. Good night.